The ridges stood on the hills of Athens like a silent giant, its long brick corridors stretching like veins across the earth, its windows staring into the darkness, as if they had seen too much and could never forget. In the late 1800s, people brought the broken minds here, believing the walls could heal them, believing the doctors could silence the voices in their heads. But some voices, they say, never belonged to this world. One stormy night, a young caretaker named Daniel walked through the endless hallways, his lantern flickering, his footsteps echoing through the empty wards. The building had been abandoned for years, yet the air felt crowded, heavy, as if invisible eyes were watching him from every corner. He had heard the stories, patients who disappeared, doctors who experimented too far, and whispers of jinn, like spirits that fed on human despair. But he told himself they were just tales meant to scare the weak. As he passed Ward C, he heard footsteps behind him. Slow, careful, matching his rhythm. He turned, but the hallway was empty. Then a door creaked open by itself, revealing a room with peeling paint and a broken bed. Inside, the temperature dropped suddenly, his breath turning to mist. He felt a presence, not human, not entirely ghost, something older, something unseen. Like the jinn of ancient deserts that had followed human suffering across continents. He stepped closer, and suddenly he heard whispers, dozens of them, overlapping voices telling stories of pain, isolation, and madness. Shadows began to form along the walls, stretching unnaturally, twisting into figures with hollow eyes. One shadow stepped forward, its shape flickering like smoke, and Daniel felt its gaze pierce his soul. He tried to move, but his legs felt heavy, as if the building itself was holding him. They say many patients at the ridges spoke of spirits who whispered to them at night, telling them secrets, driving them deeper into madness. Some believed these were jinn that thrived in places of suffering, attaching themselves to vulnerable minds. Others believed the spirits of the dead patients never left, trapped between worlds, wandering the corridors forever. As Daniel walked deeper into the asylum, he felt as if he was stepping into their memories, reliving their terror, their loneliness, their screams that once echoed through these walls. In the old treatment room, he found strange markings on the walls, symbols that looked like rituals, circles, and unknown scripts. He felt a sudden pressure on his chest, as if unseen hands were pushing him back. The lantern flickered wildly, and for a moment, he saw figures standing around him, patients, doctors, and dark shadowy beings that didn't look human at all. Their eyes glowed faintly, and their whispers grew louder, speaking in languages he couldn't understand. He ran down the hallway, but the building felt endless, as if the corridors were rearranging themselves, guiding him deeper instead of letting him escape. He heard laughter, crying, and footsteps all around him, a continuous loop of sound that had never stopped since the asylum closed. Some say the spirits here replay their suffering every night, and the jinn, like entities, enjoy trapping visitors in that cycle of fear and confusion. At the end of the corridor, he reached a window overlooking the hills. Lightning flashed, and for a second, he saw silhouettes standing outside on the grounds. Dozens of them, watching the building, waiting, as if they were souls who could never move on. When he turned back, a pale figure stood inches from his face, its mouth opening as if to scream, but no sound came out. The lantern dropped from his hand, and the hallway plunged into darkness, leaving only the whispers, and the feeling that something unseen was now walking beside him, following him, never leaving. The Ridges was not just a building of bricks and iron gates. It was a world built on fear, hope, and human suffering, rising quietly on the hills of Athens, Ohio, like a silent watcher over the town below. In the late 1800s, people believed that madness could be locked away, that strange thoughts and broken minds could be healed by isolating them from society. Families arrived with trembling hands and tearful eyes, handing over their loved ones to the asylum's cold corridors, believing they were sending them to a place of healing, not knowing they were also sending them into a maze where reality and darkness would slowly blend together. The doctors of the Ridges were respected, feared, and sometimes worshipped as miracle workers. But inside the wards, patients whispered different stories. Long hallways stretched endlessly, echoing with distant screams at night, and rooms smelled of chemicals, medicine, and despair. Patients were subjected to harsh treatments, ice baths, isolation rooms, shock therapies, and experimental procedures that blurred the line between science and cruelty. Some patients believed the doctors were not only treating them, but studying something unseen, something that followed madness like a shadow. Late at night, when the gas lamps flickered and the nurses' footsteps faded, strange things were said to happen. Patients claimed they saw shadowy figures standing at the ends of their beds, watching them sleep, whispering their names. Some spoke of jinn, like spirits that visited them in the darkness, promising freedom, whispering secrets, or laughing at their suffering. Others claimed they heard voices that did not belong to doctors or nurses, voices that spoke in ancient tongues, voices that seemed to come from the walls themselves, as if the building had a soul. One patient, they say, carved symbols into the wooden walls of his room, circles, strange marks, and words no one could understand. He claimed he was communicating with unseen entities that lived in the asylum long before humans arrived. He said the jinn had chosen the place because human pain had opened a doorway between worlds. The doctors dismissed him as insane, but after his disappearance, those symbols were never removed, and some staff later claimed they felt watched whenever they entered that room. As years passed, deaths occurred, some natural, some mysterious, some whispered about but never recorded. Rumors spread that spirits of patients who died in despair could not leave, their souls trapped in the endless corridors they once wandered. Nurses reported seeing pale figures walking through locked doors, hearing crying in empty wards, and feeling cold hands brush against their arms. Some believed these were ghosts of the forgotten patients, while others feared something older had settled there, feeding on sorrow and madness. The Ridges became a place where science and the supernatural seemed to overlap, where jinn, like spirits, ghosts, and human fear formed an invisible presence that never faded. Even when the asylum eventually closed, the building did not feel empty. People said the walls remembered everything, the suffering, the experiments, the whispers in the night, and that anyone who walked through its halls could still feel the weight of those lost souls, as if the past was not dead, but waiting in silence, watching every step, listening to every breath, and slowly drawing visitors deeper into its shadowed history. As the years passed, the Ridges began to earn a reputation that spread far beyond Athens. Whispered in towns and spoken in hushed tones, by those who had walked its corridors after dark. Visitors and staff alike claimed that the building was never truly silent. Even when abandoned, even when every room stood empty. At night, the hallways seemed to come alive, as if the asylum remembered every footstep that had ever touched its floors and was determined to repeat them forever. One security guard, assigned to patrol the deserted wards, claimed he heard footsteps following him, slow and deliberate, matching his pace no matter how fast he walked. When he stopped, the footsteps stopped. When he turned around, there was no one there, only a long corridor fading into darkness. He felt a breath on his neck, cold and unnatural, and for a brief moment, he thought he heard someone whisper his name in a voice that sounded both human and ancient at the same time. Many paranormal investigators who visited the ridges reported seeing shadowy figures moving in the corners of their cameras. Some captured images of pale shapes standing near windows, staring out into the hills, as if waiting for something or someone. Others recorded electronic voice phenomena, whispers, faint cries, and broken sentences that sounded like lost souls trying to speak across time. Some of the voices, they claimed, did not sound human at all, speaking in strange tones that reminded them of jinn, entities believed to exist in another dimension, unseen but always nearby. Late at night, people have reported doors slamming on their own, lights flickering without explanation, and sudden cold spots that felt like invisible hands brushing against the skin. In one abandoned ward, a visitor felt a sudden pressure on his chest, as if someone unseen was sitting on him, watching him breathe, listening to his heartbeat. He claimed he saw a dark figure standing in the doorway, its shape shifting like smoke, its eyes glowing faintly, before it vanished into the wall. He later said he felt as if the building had chosen him, as if something inside the ridges had followed him home. Some witnesses spoke of hearing children's laughter echoing through the halls, even though no children had been admitted for decades. Others heard crying, begging, and scratching sounds coming from locked rooms. When they opened the doors, the rooms were empty, but the air felt thick, heavy, filled with sorrow. It was said that the ghosts of former patients replayed their final moments, trapped in an endless loop, unable to move on. Wandering through the corridors where they once waited for healing that never came. There were also darker stories of shadow beings that were not ghosts, entities that felt intelligent, watching, waiting. Some visitors believed these were jinn, like spirits drawn to the intense emotional energy of the asylum. They claimed these beings could mimic human voices, appear in human form, and manipulate the minds of the living. A few investigators reported feeling sudden fear, confusion, and sadness while inside the ridges, emotions so strong they felt unnatural, as if something was feeding on their minds. One night, a group of students exploring the asylum claimed they saw a woman in an old hospital gown, standing at the end of a hallway, staring at them silently. When they approached her, she vanished into thin air, leaving behind a strong smell of antiseptic and cold air. Another witness claimed he saw a doctor's figure walking through a locked door, carrying a clipboard, repeating the same rote over and over, as if stuck in time. The ridges, they say, does not just show ghosts, it tells stories through sounds, shadows, and feelings. The building itself seems alive, breathing, remembering, and reacting to those who dare to enter. Some believe the spirits of patients remain, trapped by their suffering. Others believe jinn-like entities roam the halls, using the echoes of pain to manifest themselves, blending with the ghosts until no one can tell where the human spirits end and the otherworldly beings begin. And anyone who walks its corridors at night can feel that unseen eyes are watching, unseen footsteps are following, and unseen whispers are speaking directly into the mind. Some people believe ghosts are born from human memories, but others believe something far older walks beside humanity, something unseen that watches suffering with curiosity. At the ridges, many visitors felt that the presence was not only human, not only the restless souls of patients, but something different, something that did not belong to this world. They whispered that jinn-like spirits were drawn to the asylum long before it was abandoned, feeding on fear, despair, and broken minds like shadows feeding on darkness. When the asylum was still active, patients often spoke of beings that visited them at night. They described tall, shadowy figures standing in the corners of their rooms, whispering promises of escape, telling them secrets, laughing when they cried. Doctors dismissed these visions as hallucinations, but some nurses secretly admitted that they too felt watched, as if invisible eyes followed them through the corridors. They spoke of sudden chills, heavy air, and the feeling that someone unseen was walking just behind them, listening to every thought. One elderly patient claimed a jinn spoke to him through the walls, telling him that the asylum was built on a thin veil between worlds. He said human suffering had weakened the barrier, allowing spirits from another dimension to enter. He drew maps of the building, marking spots where he felt the presence strongest, claiming those were doorways where jinn crossed into the human world. After his death, staff members who walked past those same locations reported hearing whispers and feeling dizzy, as if the air itself was alive. Visitors today still report intense emotional changes when entering certain rooms, sudden sadness, fear, or anger that appears without reason. Paranormal researchers suggest that these emotions could be spiritual energy, but others believe they are signs of jinn influence. In many cultures, jinn are said to affect human minds, causing fear, illusions, and hallucinations. At the ridges, some people felt their thoughts were not their own, as if something unseen was pressing into their minds, testing their fear. There are stories of people seeing shadow beings that move differently than ghosts. Unlike human spirits, these shapes do not walk, they glide, stretch, and twist like smoke. Their eyes glow faintly, and their forms change, sometimes appearing human, sometimes monstrous. Witnesses claim these beings watch from the ceilings, corners, and doorways, observing silently, as if studying human fear. When approached, they vanish instantly, leaving behind a heavy pressure in the air. One investigator claimed he tried to communicate with the spirits using recording devices. Instead of human voices, he captured strange low-frequency sounds and distorted whispers that did not match any known language. He believed these could be jinn voices, entities communicating in frequencies humans barely understand. Another visitor claimed he heard his own voice, calling him from an empty room, inviting him inside. But when he entered, the door slammed shut and the lights went out, leaving him alone in complete darkness, with the feeling that something invisible was standing inches away. The idea that jinn are attracted to suffering makes the ridges a perfect place for them. Thousands of patients experienced fear, loneliness, and despair within those walls. Some died forgotten, buried without families, their pain soaking into the building like a spiritual stain. Many believe such emotional energy acts like a beacon, calling unseen entities that thrive on human emotion. The asylum, with its history of madness and isolation, may have become a gathering place not only for ghosts, but for entities that were never human. People who stayed overnight reported strange dreams, visions of shadowy figures watching them sleep, whispering their names. Some woke up with scratches, bruises, or a feeling of being touched by unseen hands. They said it felt different from a ghost, more intelligent, more aware, more curious, as if something was observing humanity from another realm, using the ridges as a window into our world. Even skeptics admit that the ridges feels different from other haunted places. The atmosphere is heavy, the silence thick, and the darkness feels alive. Some say the ghosts of patients wander endlessly, replaying their suffering, while Jinn-like entities walk among them. Invisible observers in a place where pain opened a doorway between worlds. And anyone who walks those corridors alone at night might feel that unseen presence, that silent watcher, that shadow that moves just a little too intelligently, just a little too close. As if something beyond human understanding is sharing the halls, listening, watching, and slowly stepping closer with every heartbeat. Paranormal investigators who entered the ridges often said the building felt like a living entity, as if it could sense their presence the moment they stepped inside. The moment the heavy doors closed behind them, the outside world seemed to vanish, and the silence inside felt unnatural, like the calm before a storm that never truly ends. Many carried cameras, recorders, and sensors, believing science could explain what fear could not. But the deeper they went, the more they realized some things refused to be measured. One team set up night vision cameras in an abandoned ward, placing microphones along the hallway to capture any sound. Hours passed in complete silence, until suddenly, the devices began to register footsteps, slow, rhythmic steps moving from one end of the corridor to the other. The cameras showed nothing, but the microphones recorded something else. Faint whispers layered over each other, speaking in broken phrases, as if dozens of voices were trying to speak at once. When they played the audio back later, some of the voices sounded human, while others sounded distorted, deep, and unnatural, like something trying to imitate human speech. Another investigator claimed his electromagnetic sensor spiked wildly near a certain room where several patients had died under mysterious circumstances. As he stepped inside, his flashlight flickered, and he felt a sudden dizziness, as if the room itself was pressing into his mind. He later described seeing a shadow in the corner that did not match his own movement, a figure that seemed to stretch and twist like smoke. He believed it was not a ghost, but something else, an entity observing him, reacting to his presence, intelligent and aware. Like a jinn watching a stranger in its territory. Many researchers spoke about feeling emotions that did not belong to them. In certain corridors, they felt sudden despair, fear, or anger without reason. Some started to cry or felt the urge to leave immediately, as if an unseen force was influencing their thoughts. In many cultures, jinn are believed to influence human emotions and thoughts. And some investigators began to wonder if the ridges was not only haunted by ghosts, but also influenced by entities that could manipulate the living, feeding on their fear and confusion. Electronic voice phenomena captured inside the asylum often terrified the researchers. One recording reportedly included a voice saying, "Do not leave," while another captured a whispering chant in an unknown language. Some believed these were the voices of trapped spirits, while others thought they were jinn communicating in frequencies beyond normal human hearing. One team claimed they recorded a voice responding intelligently to questions, as if something unseen was listening and answering from the darkness. In one chilling investigation, a researcher claimed he felt someone touch his shoulder while he was alone in a locked ward. When he turned around, he saw a pale figure standing behind him, its face blurred, its eyes hollow. Before he could speak, the figure faded into the wall, leaving behind a sudden cold that made his breath visible. Later, his camera captured a faint silhouette near the same spot, but no one else had been there. He believed he had encountered a spirit of a former patient, but he also admitted the presence felt different, more intense, more aware, as if something unseen had been watching him for a long time. Some investigators believe the ridges acts like a spiritual magnet, collecting energy from decades of suffering. They say the emotional trauma of thousands of patients created a powerful spiritual residue, attracting both human spirits and jinn-like entities. In the darkness, these energies overlap, creating an environment where reality feels unstable, where shadows seem alive, and where the boundary between worlds feels dangerously thin. There are stories of researchers losing track of time inside the building, walking through corridors that seem to stretch endlessly, hearing footsteps behind them that never revealed a source. Some reported seeing reflections in broken mirrors that did not match their own movements. Others felt someone breathing beside them in empty rooms. They all described the same feeling, that the ridges was watching them, testing their fear, and slowly revealing its secrets only to those who dared to stay long enough in the darkness. Even experienced paranormal experts admitted that the ridges felt different from other haunted places. It was not just a collection of ghost stories. It felt like a gateway where ghosts wandered, jinn observed, and unseen forces quietly studied the living, waiting for footsteps in the hallway, waiting for a heartbeat in the dark, waiting for someone brave or foolish enough to walk deeper into its endless corridors, where whispers never stop and shadows never stand still. Over time, the ridges transformed from a forgotten hospital into a legend, a place spoken of in ghost hunter circles, whispered about by locals, and feared by those who had spent even one night within its walls. What once was a symbol of medical progress became a symbol of everything that could go wrong when humans tried to control the mind and spirit. Long after the patients were gone, long after the doctors left, the asylum refused to sleep, its corridors still carrying echoes of footsteps that never stopped walking. Thrill seekers began to arrive, young explorers, paranormal investigators, and storytellers, all drawn by the reputation that the ridges had built over decades. They came at dusk, when the sun dipped behind the hills and shadows stretched across the grounds like dark fingers reaching for the building. As they stepped inside, many felt a sudden shift, as if they had crossed into another world, a place where time slowed and the air itself felt heavy with unseen presence. Some visitors claimed they heard voices calling them by name, even though they had never told anyone who they were. Others reported seeing lights in the windows at night, moving from room to room, as if someone was walking through the wards with a lantern. A few brave individuals attempted to spend the night inside, setting up sleeping bags and cameras, but many left before sunrise, shaken, claiming they felt watched, followed, and mentally exhausted, as if something had been feeding on their fear. There are stories of people seeing full body apparitions walking through hallways, patients in old hospital gowns, doctors in long coats, nurses pushing invisible wheelchairs. These spirits seemed unaware of the living, repeating the same actions again and again, trapped in their final routines. But there were also darker sightings, shadow figures that did not repeat patterns, that watched, moved intelligently, and reacted to human presence. Witnesses said these entities felt different from ghosts, more aware, more curious, more dangerous. Some believe these are jinn, like spirits that settled in the ridges, because of the intense suffering that once filled the building. In many traditions, jinn are said to gather in abandoned places, dark corners, and locations soaked in human emotion. The asylum, with its history of madness, loneliness, and despair, may have become a perfect home for them. Visitors reported hearing whispers in unknown languages, feeling sudden fear without reason, and experiencing dreams where shadowy figures stood beside their beds, watching them sleep. Local legends speak of people who entered the ridges and came out changed. They described feeling followed for days, hearing footsteps in their own homes, seeing shadows in mirrors that moved when they did not. Some believed something from the asylum had attached itself to them, a spirit or jinn curious about the world beyond the hills, using the visitor as a doorway. Whether these stories are true or imagined, they only added to the building's reputation as one of the most haunted places in Ohio. The Ridges became a pilgrimage site for paranormal researchers, YouTubers, and documentary teams. Every year, new recordings, photographs, and eyewitness accounts surfaced, whispers on tape, figures in photos, shadows on video. Skeptics tried to explain them as tricks of light and sound, but those who experienced the asylum firsthand often said there was something deeper, something that could not be captured by cameras, something that could only be felt in the darkness when you were alone in the hallway, listening to footsteps that were not your own. Even today, people say the asylum never feels empty. The wind moves through broken windows like breath. Doors creak as if touched by invisible hands, and the halls echo with sounds that have no source. Ghosts of patients, spirits of doctors, and unseen jinn, like entities, are believed to coexist within those walls, blending into a single presence that watches anyone who dares to enter. And as night falls on the hills of Athens, the Ridges stands silently, its windows dark, its corridors endless, its past alive in every shadow, every whisper, every step that echoes through the darkness, as if the building itself is still waiting for the next visitor to walk inside and become part of its story. And so, the Ridges remains not just a building, but a living memory of sorrow, fear, and the unknown. Its walls remember every scream, every whisper, every shadow that walked those halls. Some say if you step inside after dark, you may feel a presence brush against your mind, hear voices that are not your own, or see shadows that were never human. The ghosts of the past linger, the jinn wait, and the spirits watch, patient and silent, ready to pull you into the stories that the asylum refuses to release. If you dare to explore the unknown, to uncover what lies beyond the veil of this haunted place, then keep your eyes open, your heart steady, and remember, you are never truly alone inside the ridges. And if this story has sent a chill down your spine, if the whispers of the past have reached you even here, then share it with those who dare. Subscribe for more journeys into the dark, and step carefully, because some doors, once opened, are never truly closed.